Hello to everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We're really excited to have you and to have our incredible guest speakers here today and for all of you. So my name is Grace. I am the events and campaign coordinator at Personal Pack, and we, like I said, are really grateful for you all being here. And before we get started, I just want to let you all know that we are recording this event and we will be having a Q&A session in a little bit here. So if you have any questions that you would like to get answered, please feel free to put them in the chat, or you can directly message me and we'll do our best to get to them. And additionally, I am very excited to introduce you all to our co-hosts and our co-chairs of Personal Pack's Future Voices Council. So first of all, we've got Hannah. Hannah is a communications professional with experience in political campaigns for pro-choice champions and government administration. She's currently working on the communication team of the Cook County Board President, Tony Preckwinkle, while working for the Illinois Senate Democratic Fund during the 2018 midterm election. Hannah worked closely with women and first-time candidates who flipped Republican stronghold seats in Chicago's suburbs, which is super awesome. Hannah holds a bachelor's degree from Miami University and a master's in communication from Northwestern University. So hello to Hannah, and you'll hear from her soon. Next up, we have Chloe. Chloe is a recent graduate of Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management, and she currently serves as an associate director of marketing at Crescent Partners, a private investment firm. Prior to Kellogg, Chloe was an early employee at Attention, a Los Angeles-based digital media startup that engages millennials by producing entertaining content about social issues, including reproductive justice and gender equality. So you can see why she is here today. So like I said, super excited to have you both, and really thank you so much for making this event happen. I'm going to pass it over to you two to really get us started.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Grace.
And thank you to everyone for joining. We're super excited. And we had a lot of RSVPs, which is great. I think just to give a quick overview on Future Voices Council, or FVC, our mission is to build a community of our peers who are passionate about protecting women's reproductive rights. And so the way we hope to do that is, we're committed to hosting educational events and just cool discussions like this one, and also other opportunities to support candidates for elected office in Illinois in the future. We are this is sort of information. And so for those of you who are on this call and are millennials and Gen Z who want to get involved, we need your voices, so feel free to reach out to us. We have captured you all on our email list, so you'll hear from us whether you like it or not, and hopefully you like it. And for those who are of other generations, just want to encourage you to encourage the young people in your life to also reach out to us, get involved, join our events, so that we can build the next sort of pipeline of Personal Pack warriors. So with that, I think, Hannah, do you want to jump in and we're going to introduce our amazing guests?
Yes, thanks so much, Chloe. And thank you to everyone who's joined us and to our panelists tonight. We're really excited for this conversation. So first, I'd like to introduce our director. Natalia Veckich is a screenwriter and a director. She won a Golden Gate Award at the San Francisco International Film Festival for her short film, Lost and Found. And she was also the recipient of the Princess Grace Award in Film. She's a graduate of UCLA's MFA screenwriting program, and she was invited to participate in the Film Independent Screenwriting Lab, selected as an honoree in the Writers Guild of America's West Future Access Diversity Project, and was a top 10 finalist in the Page International Screenwriting Awards with her feature screenplay, which is our film tonight, Jane. Natalia writes and directs gritty, suspenseful dramas from the perspective of immigrants, outsiders, and women who boldly shape history, which I'm sure you could tell from tonight's film. Through her writing and directing, she wants to amplify the voices of characters on the margins. She loves to tackle complex and gritty female characters. So thank you so much for joining us.
I'm going to introduce Michelle Prada, who played Teresa in the film. She is best known for her role as Emma on Star's critically acclaimed series Vita, which recently won a GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Comedy Series. She was a featured character on AMC's web series Fear the Walking Dead. And Michelle's other credits include indie films The Two Dogs, Tell Me How I Die, and There's a New World Somewhere. You guys have our guests have so many credentials and credits. It's like I have to read in order to get them all.
And lastly, our second actress who's joined us tonight is Mckenna Melvin. She's best known for her role of Alex McHugh on NBC's Chuck. She's also appeared in numerous TV shows, including her first role on Fox's Lie to Me, alongside Tim Roth, and ABC's Once Upon a Time, CBS Vegas, ABC's Castle, Grey's Anatomy, and CSI. She can also be seen in films like The Bad Guys, which premiered at the Austin Film Festival. Mckenna co-created and starred in Amber Lake, an independent film directed by Joe Robert Cole. Most recently, she co-wrote, produced, and co-starred in the short film Stuck. She's currently working on a new short narrative that she plans to direct. So welcome, Mckenna. Now we'd like to turn it over to Natalia to talk a little bit about the film and what the process of creating it was like.
Really quickly, I just want to mention to everyone who's joined us, what we're going to do is turn it over to Natalia, and then Hannah and I have some questions that we're going to ask about the film and the process, but feel free at any point if you have questions to send them in the chat, and we're definitely going to take some Q&A from the audience. And then we'll tell you a little bit about what Personal Pack is focused on and wrap hopefully a great event. So Natalia, all yours.
Hi. Well, the journey, can everybody hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up. Great. The journey really started many years ago when I was at UCLA and I wrote the first draft of the feature and tried to get it made. And that's a long and winding story, which we only have an hour. So I'll cut it down to along the way, I decided once I got into one of these labs and wanted to do a rewrite that I was actually going to interview some of the real people who were the Janes. And one of them is actually, I'm staring right at her in one of my squares. I don't know where she is for you, but her name is Judith Arcana. And she very graciously did an interview with me, a long interview in person. I spoke to several other women, including Heather Booth and another member who was there in the middle of the Jane experience. And from that, I rewrote the screenplay a bunch of times. And ultimately, when I figured out that, it didn't look like the money was going to get raised, the $1 million or more that I needed to make the feature, I decided to make a short film. And wrote it and really got these amazing actors on board, Michelle and Mckenna and Tyra and Leia. And we really worked really hard together in the rehearsal process and along the way to make the short film and to really, obviously, like in a short piece, you can't tell the entire breadth of a story of the Janes. There was such a long arc from them starting to be a referral service and really counseling women and referring them to doctors that they felt were safe to actually learning to do it themselves. So obviously, when you have anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes, you really have to truncate that story. And that's ultimately what we did, but with keeping the spirit of the story and keeping the spirit of the women and keeping the spirit of what they tried to create. And, seeing what's going on this week, hearing about the case in front of the Supreme Court, it's just really disillusioning after doing so much research and figuring out how hard it was for women and how devastating it was to do all the things that women had to do to get a safe abortion, to now be facing the end of Roe v. Wade. So anyways, I could go on and on, but I'm gonna let you ask some questions.
Amazing. Well, I think Oh, Hannah, you're on mute. I think our, one of the questions, and I'm smiley, but don't take that as this being something I'm happy about. One of the questions that we wanted to ask is, obviously this film is about the pre-Roe era. And as you mentioned, we are fast approaching what we think is going to be a sort of post-Roe era. What similarities, based on your interviews, people you spoke to sort of about this pre-Roe era, do you see between then and now?
Well, like if you look at those states, I mean, you have a map yourself, I think, on your site that's very clearly shows the coasts being safe areas where you can get an abortion pretty easily and accessibly. And then you look at the middle of the country and it's a swath of red, and with one firewall being Illinois. When we were doing the Kickstarter for this, one of the things that was going on at the time is like, sure, there's Roe v. Wade, but if you don't have actual access to abortion or any reproductive services in your community, that's, very similar to what it was before. If you have to travel thousands of miles, as women did, to go to Mexico if they had money, or to Europe if they had money in the 60s, it's very similar, because if you don't have access, then having legislation that just says, oh yeah, it's legal, but there's actually no access, and it's very unsafe for women to go to those places, and there are crazy people in front of them protesting when they do get there. Well, that's not real access. So that to me is a similarity.
I think I'll just chime in. I think you hit something right on the head. It's the reality of it is, if you have money, you always have access to it. There's always a doctor that you can find. Or, I mean, we look at even with the vaccines, like the moment that was even available, the amount of people that I was aware of that were just getting it, like jumping in line ahead. Like if you have money, like these laws don't apply to you. You have access, you can find a doctor, you can find this. And really the people that are being affected disproportionately are the people that don't. And which is, obviously leans into healthcare and highlights just a very big flaw in the way that our country runs on capitalism.
So I think we'll pose the next question to our actresses. Michelle, it's great to see you, and Mckenna. So why did you choose to take part in this film, and what interested you about the topic? Did you want to go first, Michelle?
Oh, I was pointing at you to.
Oh, I was pointing at you. Guys, I can go first. I mean, it was like it's always, I feel like this question has been asked a lot of both of us, and I'm always surprised that it's asked, and then I am surprised at myself for being surprised that it's asked, because it feels like a taboo topic to be talking about, and it feels wild to me that it's a taboo topic to be talking about, because it's my body, it's our as women's bodies. And I remember when I was first talking to Natalia, I had never heard about the Janes, and that felt really, well, I was like felt so like amazed by what they had done. And then also my next thought was, I was so angry that I hadn't learned about this really important piece of what I feel like was history of being a woman in this country, and that there was this group of women who were helping other women get basic access to healthcare. And the more and more I talked to Natalia about it, and the more and more we kind of unpacked everything, honestly, I was just very excited to be part of it. And then when I heard I would get to work with Michelle, I was also really excited, because she's just incredible. And yeah, that's my version.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I mean, I think that there is also something really important in us collectively speaking up and helping each other tell the stories. And I think for so long we've had there's this idea of like just getting one point of view across or whatever, but I agree with Mckenna so much, where it just feels like it's this version of the story is so nuanced and so important, because we really love, I think, to create one team or the other, or be like, oh well, that's just that one way to be or whatever. And what I loved about it is, and I think Natalia really did such a great job and in just the writing of it, is that like it's so nuanced. Like there really is, it's not like the young girl that's scared and that's it, you know, or the person who's on her 7th abortion is like, I don't get it, like, you know, just the caricature that's sometimes painted, where it's like, no, these are real women coming together and helping each other to just, yeah, to create the change that we need. Because I think we look at I don't know, we look at the establishment, which has never been for us, and expect it to change. And we're, you know, I think it was really exciting to get to work with such amazing people that were committed to that as well.
I'm jumping in and going rogue from our Hannah and Grace know our set of questions, but I think as I'm listening to you guys, I'm also curious, Natalia, like what was your, you know, prior to really starting to research and interview and work on the feature that ultimately became this short film, what did you know about women's reproductive rights? What did you know about the genes, and sort of what were the, you know, I imagine there were a lot of shocking things that you learned, if you're comfortable speaking to some of those, but would love to just hear about what that experience was like, you know, confronting all of this information.
I mean, I wish that I could tell you that, like, for me, what was revelatory about the Janes was the idea of the collective and this group of women really being like, the government's not going to help us. The police aren't going to help us. No one's going to help us. No one's going to save us. We need to save ourselves. I think that that's like a really great lesson from reading about the Janes, is that like sometimes you have to be your own Shiro or hero, and you have to take on the responsibility. To me, like the collective is one of the strongest things that comes out of that book, and like working together to create change. It wasn't much of a surprise for me in terms of what the situation was before Roe v. Wade, because I had grown up part of the time in the Central Valley, which is incredibly, incredibly conservative politically, and very religiously conservative. And so for me, I had actually, even in the 90s, there was a group called Veckich that did clinic defense. And I had seen some of the craziness that happens outside of clinics. And I had understood the stakes pretty well because of my own mother, who's from a different country, from a different era, and very much understood what, to some degree, it would have been like for a woman. And so the thing that was so unique about the Janes is that they actually did something about it. You know, that they actually did something about it in a very collective way, and in a way that was really about supporting other women. And to me, that's just a great story.
Yeah, for me, one of the most like powerful moments when I was watching it was the third woman who was in the room and kind of holding her hand and reassuring her, and just kind of like that bond that they had. I thought that was just a really beautiful part of the film. So
And can I just say that that holding of the hands and the third person sitting there comes directly from Judith or Kenna and the other women that I interviewed, because, you know, they made it really clear to me. This is the other thing that I wanted to mention that was revelatory, was that it wasn't medicalized, that this was about like taking care of women. And so that extra person in the room, they were not the doctor and they were not quite the nurse. They were really there to help the women and to make them feel comfortable. I know from film people, sometimes when people see the film, they don't think it's dark enough, or like the bedroom's pretty well lit, and like, why is that? And the whole point was, they weren't trying to create a scary space for women. They were trying to create a comfortable space for women. They went to Marshall Fields and got sheets for them that would make them feel good. You know, like, this is really different than a medicalized procedure. It's about the women, not about making a doctor feel comfortable. And I think that's really different about the Janes too.
yeah, and to your point, I also thought the fact that it was in the daylight and kind of set in this comfortable house during the day, it made it feel like it was like a, you know, it was kind of like a routine sort of comfortable thing. So another question for the actresses, what sort of preparation did you do before taking on these roles, and how did it feel to be a part of such a tense but powerful story?
We did a lot of rehearsing with Natalia. like a lot. Like she really I mean, I think part of it was just also in the interest of time, you know, making sure that we made the best use of time when we were there. And then also there was a lot of like discussing the beats and the moments and really, um, you know, I think we all had our backstories, and by the time we kind of got to the shooting day, we felt like there was just a lot of rehearsing, which I had never really worked that way before, like in that way, and it was really nice because we had a lot of kind of space to kind of discover things on the day, which was great. And then I think, I mean, a lot of it I think was Natalia had sent us some articles and some interviews, and I went into some of that stuff, and then just researching a lot of just whatever information was out there for the Janes. And then I think just really connecting to the humanity of like just taking care of each other, because I think as they're saying, there is this like medical aspect of it, but I know Mckenna and I sat there with the nurse and learned how to actually perform the abortion. We're very like surprised at, you know, how easy I guess it was. I mean, don't I don't know if that's like really the right word to use, but you know, I guess simple. Like it wasn't this whole cloaked mystery thing, and yeah, so we you know, I felt like I learned a lot, but then also there was just, I don't know, like just the humanity of really seeing these two women support each other, seeing supporting the supporting of Beta, is that her name? I can't even remember the character. Verna. Um, and just feeling that feeling very natural, being like, yes, of course, like if someone's going through something that maybe that feels difficult, or they feel sticky about, like, you know, just supporting people in that. And it felt really natural and good. And obviously getting to work with great actors helps as well. They were, I mean, both of them were really great and wonderful.
I have all the same similar things to say as Michelle does. And again, like, just being able to have that type of rehearsal, which she spoke to, is not normal. It's not, or it doesn't happen all the time. And it feels very much like theater, which is kind of where I came from, my background. And so I felt like so excited on like an artist level to be able to sit there. And then also just to be in a group of women, like we were all a bunch of women having a conversation about telling our story. And our story, I mean, it wasn't, we're not the Janes, but our story being like the history of what it means to be a woman to get to this place. And like Michelle said, like, so I'm performing an abortion in this film. And I guess this idea that like something that was so like seemingly like an outpatient procedure that it should be available to everyone, and having this conversation with this nurse, but people died because they weren't able to get to that, really just kind of blew my mind. And I feel like that was the piece that really like sunk in for me when I like really connected to like, oh, what it means to be my character, Josie, to be able to really want to make sure that I am able to provide this for my sister, for my fellow community. And this is kind of harks back a little bit to the question you asked up top about like what's happening now. I just read what's going on in Texas today, and like how intense all of that is. But the fact that like you could potentially be sued as of September 1st for helping a woman get an abortion, even if you drive them to get an abortion, like that is the end of our film. We're leaving because maybe the police are going to come. It's like this idea of like, we are all here trying to help each other to basically just have the basic human rights that it is to be a woman and have autonomy over our body. And yeah, that's, so the whole process of us just sitting here, and then we ended up like telling each other our own stories, and it was a really powerful experience that I'm really grateful to have had. And so much of that, I mean, all of that is Natalia and the environment she set up for us as artists. So really grateful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack. I think that you all sort of touched on the one hand, the beauty of what was depicted in the film, which was this sort of community coming together. But Mckenna, to your point, I mean, I remember watching, and I certainly felt, I mean, the characters really resonate and you do kind of feel a connection to the characters immediately, but it's scary. And so I think, it does a good job of striking that balance of like, there's real fear involved. And I think this is why, it was also interesting, Natalia, to hear about you growing up in a place where, it wasn't easy to access abortion. I think we've been so lucky, Hannah and I, being in Illinois and getting involved with Personal PAC, where, even just by virtue of having the access to learn about access and having great access to healthcare ourselves makes this feel in a way like something that is so foreign and far away. But the reality is that that's why, the work that we to celebrate, people coming together to take care of each other, that's obviously not, where we want things to be going. So I appreciate kind of all of your contributions to the conversation and talking about those things, because it is really nuanced. And it does kind of, leave you with a lot of mixed feelings. And I think that that's kind of, it's tough to sit with, but I think it's important. So sort of on that topic, what was the hardest part of this for each of you and sort of coming together to create this piece of art?
Do you guys want to start? I think the hardest part is that, there's telling a story within a contained amount of time. That's a film where you have conflict and, there's like certain filmic elements that you are trying to make happen for the audience as a maker. And you're not making a documentary, right? But you want to stay true to the spirit of something through your characters. And I think that's the hardest thing is like, when I originally wrote this piece, it was a feature. I had 120 pages to tell the story of these women, their experiences, what got them to this point, to this climax of actually performing the abortion, right? And now I have to do it, on page 18 in a 18-minute film or like page 16. And so it's a really different span of time and a really different way of approaching it. And you want to make sure that even though there is that conflict and that feeling of danger, that along the way that the characters are really carrying the importance of the story and the heart of it and what it really means, which is to me, people coming together to help one another and people, that sometimes laws are not correct. Sometimes laws are not right. And I'm not advocating that everybody should break the law, but sometimes laws are just unjust. And that you as a human being and a citizen need to do something about that. And so I hope that that comes across, because the people who are involved, the hardest thing is they're living, breathing women who all had a whole story and whole stake in the story. And the stakes were really high for them. Like they could have gotten arrested. They did get arrested. They could have actually gone to jail and stayed there. And so I think that's the hard part of it, is like you're also telling a fictionalized story of something that lasted for 5 years and 18 minutes. So I think that's really, really hard. So it's more than the actual process. It's that responsibility when you are telling the stories of real people or like inspired by real people. It's an unstable terrain, because as we also know, memory is an unstable terrain. It's like you could talk to 3 of these people about the past and they will have, some things will coalesce and other things you're like, wait, were you guys in the same group? So I think that's the hard part too.
Yeah, and we just got a really great comment in the chat from Marilyn. She said one thing that hasn't been mentioned is that these providers were risking their lives to perform these abortions. They were so passionate about the issue that they would risk going to jail for these women who they didn't really know. That in itself says a lot, and that was actually right when you said that, Natalia. So thank you.
I honestly, I can't think of anything that was really that difficult in making it, other than maybe like we had period appropriate bras, and that was not really fun to kind of go back to that version of bondage. But like I said, I can't really, I can't think of anything throughout the process that felt particularly difficult. I mean, yeah, I mean, just the bras.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I'm trying to think of a thing that was difficult. And maybe this goes back to this whole thing that I've kind of, when people are like, what, like, I can't, if people have the feeling, which we've been asked before, like, how could you, what was the decision around making this story? Weren't you worried about how people would think and stuff, which shocked me. And I did understand the responsibility of telling it, but I guess like the difficulty more came afterwards in like the conversations, having people where I had to be like, oh, I feel like now I have to justify my reason for taking something that seems like a no-brainer. That was more of the difficult part. And then like really sitting with being like, okay, if I'm gonna have this conversation, which is also a piece of choosing a piece like this, like how do I make sure I'm saying it and correctly articulating why it was important and why I thought it was a really good decision for me personally. And so I think if there was anything that felt like slightly challenging, but that wouldn't be necessarily the word I was going to use, it was more of like a, oh, right, I forgot that like we're in a world right now where people have this feeling about something that we should be able to tell our stories, and we should have access to abortion, and it shouldn't be stigmatized.
Absolutely. Yeah. Katie in the chat just said it's wild that abortion still carries so much stigma, even in choosing a movie role.
I think sorry, Hannah, I cut you off, but I'm curious, you guys mentioned a little bit, and Marilyn's comment speaks to this too. Hi, Marilyn. But a little bit about this sort of like responsibility of telling this story. And I'm curious for the actors, sort of, knowing that you are telling a story that is based on true events, does that change the way that you approach the role or internalize kind of the role or process?
I mean, I think we were essentially, each of us were a compilation of different characters or different real life people. So it wasn't like we were having to like recreate a specific person. So I would say, in general, yes, if you're approaching a role and in trying to recreate like, Freddie Mercury or something, you're gonna, do a different research than something like this. I think this was just a lot of like just understanding. I think there was, I know I did a lot of work and also understanding the time period, because I think in the way that that speaks to what McKenna's saying, where it's like, I mean, which we're not there, but there is a part of me that is in the same, where it's just like, I don't understand what the problem is. Like, why are we, like, if you don't like abortions, just don't get one. Like, I just don't understand where the problem is. But realizing that in that time, like that was fully there was a whole other weight of that and heroism of that. So I think that it was less about the character specifically, but more about really kind of putting yourself in that mindset. And even, I kind of added in with some of my like character work or whatever, that she actually came from a very religious family and had, and essentially, so then when she's having this conversation with Verna, it's almost like she's having this conversation with herself. Because there's always that little part of you that's still like, I don't know, like, or whatever, like in the back, if you grew up in that way. So it's almost like she's hearing that voice of hers. I mean, that's you know, just my character work, I guess, and what I like folded into that, so that when she's having those conversations, it's not just about Berna, it's also about like, that could be her aunt, that could be like her family that she came from, and now kind of having to comfort that part of her because of the
Yeah.
time period.
It's really interesting. I feel like you can definitely see that now that you mention it, sort of in hindsight, you see that tension that the character's experiencing. Mckenna, was it different for you or sort of similar? Sorry, the Zoom thing is such a bummer, you guys. We're gonna get
For a
back to
second.
doing these in person soon.
You asked me if it was similar to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to your experience.
Yeah, I mean, well, also we had such a gift in Natalia because she's been, I mean, she's like this, she's been researching, she was talking to the Janes, and I felt very safe to tell this role because we met for coffee the first time we even kind of like talked about potentially working together. And after that, I was like, okay, I feel safe with this person to tell this story because I feel like I have a teammate and I'm not going to do it a disservice if I show up and do the work. But I would say the only thing that really, I mean, everything that Michelle's saying, we did our backstory, we had like big conversations. I remember Tyra, we had like a really great conversation about like race and what it was like for being an African-American woman trying to get abortion at that time, and really having an honest discussion about what it means for all of us, like all of our specific points of view. Like, I'm white, Michelle is Latin, right? How do you identify?
Yeah, Latina.
And just like really have it, like, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna do the most honest portrayal of what it would be like for each of us as individuals and as characters in this moment. And I felt really safe the whole time because of Natalia and because of the conversations we were having. And if anything, I felt like we needed more time to tell this story. Like 18 minutes is just, we needed more time to tell there's so much story here. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I guess in kind of, this is the last of our prepared questions, and then we'll get to some of the questions in the chat. But is there anything you want to kind of leave the viewers with after viewing Jane, or something that you think they should act on? Especially, we've talked a lot about kind of the generational lens that we're viewing the film in, but maybe something for younger generations watching this film.
Well, I'm having a hard time. I don't see everybody who's in the gallery view. I do see some people in the gallery view, but I think the most important thing, and I think this is something that I found so revelatory when I read about the Janes, is just to educate a younger generation of people of what it was like before Roe v. Wade, what it was like for women, what it is like still in states where there's no access. Like, I just really think it's important when I hear that a certain percentage, which I can't remember right now, but when I hear a certain percentage of the population doesn't know what Roe v. Wade means or what it is, that is terrifying. When I hear people kind of be like, well, it'll be fine, or, you know, I'm fine, I'm older, like, that's really not in the spirit of the Janes. You know, like, the whole thing is like, there's a younger generation that should be mentored by people to take the next step and the next, you know, and be the next kind of Jane Firewall. And so to me, if anything, it's just like, if there are educators here, if there are people who are university professors, if there are people who are in organizations, like, you know, I'm so excited to share the film with people where it actually matters. I think film festivals as a filmmaker are amazing. I wish this film had come out when we had in-person film festivals. But I feel like the beauty of this moment is like, there are so many people here who probably couldn't go to Chicago or couldn't, like, there are so many ways to screen this film right now and have a conversation. So to me, it's like, if they're educators, they should contact us, because like, I feel like very excited about sharing the film with younger people and talking about it, so that like breadth of knowledge gets passed down. You know, people should be reading Judith's books. She was there, like, that knowledge should be passed down. Like, that's what I think. I'm very long-winded, I realize, for Zoom.
No, it's great. And I think sort of sets us up perfectly for what we're trying to do. So we again just appreciate you and are, feeling really lucky that we have something like this to share with everyone. I'm just looking in the chat, just, at any point, by the way, if people want to unmute and ask questions, feel free, or if you want to submit them in the chat, I can read them off. Sarah asked if, Natalia, you would still be willing or interested in turning this into a feature.
I would love to do that. I have to say in a really diplomatic way, because I'm in Los Angeles, there are like people, actually like 4 different groups of people now making this feature. So there's a feature being made probably by Amazon. There's several like very high profile people. You can easily Google it on Hollywood Reporter or one of those that are making the feature. And for me, it was just important. I felt like after spending all this time and effort and research, and also just being quite frankly, like as a filmmaker passionate about the story, I just wanted to make some version of it. I felt like I could also, in a short film, do things that maybe people won't do in a feature, be as explicit, be, pushing the boundaries. So I feel like totally, I would love to make this into a TV show actually after making the short, because quite frankly, just seeing like the amount of stuff that I had to, even in that 120 pages, cram together, at the time when I wrote it, I wish I had the prescience, like the knowledge to be like, oh, TV is going to be this really big thing. It's actually a great series. Like, I think following the strands of the different women, like what brought them to the group, how the group evolved, like over the arc of seasons, like I think that's actually like an amazing format. And I've written the pilot, but
Well, I would love to see that. I hope it happens. I liked what you said earlier about this film being kind of like an education tool, and it really is. I think for me, I'm in my 20s, and that was just it was a really powerful thing for me to watch, because that's just so not the image or what we think about how an abortion would be today. But this kind of goes into a question I got earlier. This is from Elizabeth. She said, how do we get people who are on the fence about protecting Roe to see films like this one and to join the fight?
I'll speak up on this just as someone who is very close with a lot of the organizers for BLM, and just seeing the things. It's the reality, and this is just my point of view from being very close with a lot of activists and organizers, is that it's less about changing people's minds, and it's more about empowering the people and the voices that already believe it. And I think one of the most, because yes, like we'd love to be able to control what everybody else thinks, but we just can't. Like we will scream till we're blue in the face and hoarse. And the reality is, it's empowering the people who already think that way, because a lot of times we feel so weak and not capable of moving things forward. BLM started 7, or at this point 8 years ago. So you think of, and that's on the backs of and the passing the torch of so much else that has happened. And it's about not giving up and going and not shutting up. And I think one of the things that I think is really kind of going back to the question of what you hope people get from Jane, is that it's the power of organizing, the power of us coming together and organizing, not just like speaking out and being like, we don't like this, being like, okay, you're going to be in charge of this. That doctor isn't doing that. You're going to do this. We're going to do this. And that all comes from organization. And the reality, I think, even, I was involved on Zoom calls with Stacey Abrams with the stuff that went on in Georgia, and seeing that stuff firsthand, like from, and Stacey, that's 10 years. That's 10 years that Stacey was doing that. But what she was creating, and it's not only her, it's I think 4 other women, and Say and a few other people came together and like, we're just like, we're gonna flip Georgia 10 years ago, you know, and it takes time, and to not be discouraged, but to really understand that when you organize, there's so much power in that. So anyways, that I hope answers the question, but I know that it was something that I felt very, very powerful about, or strongly about, because I've seen it firsthand in ways that I felt were just so inspiring.
No, thank you so much. That's a really powerful sentiment to kind of close out our question and answer portion. Unless anyone else, are there any other questions? Chloe, did you get any others?
No, I just agree. I think that was the perfect segue to sort of talking a little bit about, you know, we want to share with you guys in the spirit of being empowered to speak up, you know, more of the work that Personal Pack is doing and what we're working on currently so that you feel empowered to get involved.
Yeah, so just,
Can I,
oh, yes, please.
you know, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but I think that another reality that Personal Pack has to really think about is that my daughter just had a baby, and I was able to see every single ultrasound photo. And as opposed to when I was having babies, the ultrasounds are really, really great. And when you look at these ultrasounds at a very young age, these babies look like babies.
Mhm.
And I think that's another issue that is going to be more difficult today than it ever has been. And I think that what you really need to push is that the issue is about, why is somebody telling us what we can do with our body? And I think that that's a really, really important point. People don't tell men can they take Viagra? Of course they can take Viagra. That's not a problem. I mean, that is really what the issue is. Why should anybody be able to tell me what I can do with my body? Because I think when you have these younger people looking at these ultrasounds, it could present a huge problem by just presenting this, look at this. How can you, I mean, I'm definitely playing, I don't want to say devil's advocate. I am a true lover of women's reproductive rights, Personal Pack, and everything that they've done for years. But I think this is an issue that could be coming up. I mean, I was talking to some people the other day and they were talking about this, and I think that's why it's on my mind, that when you look at these ultrasounds, how can you not think that you are harming this person inside of this womb? And that's going to be, I think, a tough issue that's going to be, you're going to hear more and more about.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. And I kind of think that goes into a lot of pro-life messaging that would really kind of further their point. So thank you for sharing. Is there anyone else, or we can share we can just move into a little bit on what Personal Pack is doing. So if it's not clear already, this film could be our reality and it could be our future. It's easy to say that we can never go back to this, but many states in the nation are already living like this. Illinois, if you look at a map, I think someone brought up the map earlier, but it truly is an island in the Midwest for reproductive rights. So on top of that, we just got this news on Monday that the Supreme Court announced it will rule on a Mississippi law banning pre-viability abortions. And this is really kind of brought this issue into the forefront. So for the first time in nearly 50 years, all states will be able to criminalize pre-viability abortion procedures, meaning safe, legal abortion will be out of reach for tens of millions of women across the country. And those with the fewest resources will suffer the most. It's easy to be overwhelmed by all of the negative news, but it's important to be reminded of what we're up against. This might seem far off, but it's not. There are currently 22 anti-abortion bills pending in the Illinois General Assembly seeking to pass just as extreme anti-abortion laws. And just for everyone's knowledge, there's only, I think, like 2 weeks left in the legislative session. So this is definitely going to be in the local news for the next couple weeks. And for these reasons, we have to make Illinois 100% pro-choice state today.
So with that in mind, and sort of, to Marilyn's point, it's easy to um, see a lot of the negative attention around this issue and the stigmatization, but we can take action, and that's why Hannah and I are so proud to be part of Personal Pack, and excited to sort of usher in the next generation of activists through Future Voices Council. So one thing that is super timely is we are inching towards repealing one of the anti-abortion laws that is still on the books in Illinois, and that is the Parental Notice of Abortion Act. So PNA, we've been mentioning PNA, but for people who are newer to this community, just by way of background, the law requires healthcare providers to notify an adult family member, a parent or a guardian. In many cases, it could be a grandparent or someone more distant, at least 48 hours before performing an abortion for a patient under 18. And there's countless examples, but generally speaking, the PNA law puts young people in harm's way and interferes with their access to time-sensitive abortion care. And just to, echo the sentiment, it interferes with their access to make decisions about their own bodies. So as Hannah said, there are 2 weeks left in the legislative session in the General Assembly. So we really could use all hands on deck to repeal Illinois' PNA law. And so what we've done is on the, Grace is going to put up the website. And so, but I want to just make sure that I also read it out. But we have put together on the website, there's a tool and it makes it really easy. You simply click a button to basically email or call your legislators and urge them to vote yes to repeal PNA. So I know that everyone has a ton going on and it's been a really busy and tumultuous time, but it takes 2 minutes to make a phone call. So if this is something that you could add to your routine, it really does go a long way. And we have a pro-choice majority, but it's not by as much of a margin as we would like. The other thing that I want to just mention is that Personal Pack is already preparing for the 2022 elections, which the 2022 election is a once in a decade election because all 177 House and Senate seats, all constitutional offices, including governor, attorney general, and all of the Cook County commissioner seats, as well as the Cook County board president, are up for election. So again, I said once in a decade, it literally only happens this way once every 10 years. And what's important about the 2022 election is that the legislative districts are going to be redrawn under this remapping process. And so again, a lot of opportunities to come together and, determine the fate of legal abortion in this, we say post-Roe, but I almost say post-Roe era. So for those of you who are able to make a donation to support the critical work that Personal Pack is doing, please consider it. And we would be incredibly grateful. For those of you, again, who are peers of Hannah and myself, we are so open to your ideas about how to organize more young people and just educate people on what's going on and how easy it is to do the work. So with that, I know that Grace was going to post the website, but just wanted to thank all of you for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I know that Zoom is not the most desirable place to bring people together for a conversation of this nature, where we love for it to be a discussion, but alas, this is what we've got, so we're working with it. Especially want to thank all of our special guests and Grace for all of her help working on putting this together, and look forward to continuing this work with all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for having us, and thank you to the Janes, and thank you, Judith Arcana. And I don't know if any of the other Janes are here, but thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
all.
much.